given all your great coverage in Gaza, I do always hear people say, well, what about the genocides and atrocities that people aren't focused on? And so I figured I would just take a look at the Lemkin Institute for Genocide Prevention, as I knew this was going to be our conversation. And on top of Palestine, they're highlighting an active genocide in Ethiopia and have been for the last year. Like several of their posts are like, hey, still going on, still going on. So to give people the cliff notes, Abiy Ahmed Ali became prime minister in 2018, and according to Wikipedia, since 2019, Ethiopia has transformed into authoritarianism under Abiy's premiership, marked by severe human rights violations, media censorship, internet shutdowns, civil conflicts, and systematic persecution of thousands of ethnic Amharis and southern Ethiopians in the southern region. Politically motivated purges have also become common, and many journalists and activists were arrested by police for alleged breach of constitutional laws. As of June 2022, 18 journalists were arrested for allegations of inciting violence while reporting for independent media outlets or YouTube channels. Abiy is also believed to have led and organized Kori Nagrinya, a secret service that purportedly commits unlawful detentions and extrajudicial killings. Ethnically motivated attacks against the Amhara have been reported, with mass graves being discovered in various locations. The results of 2 consecutive national sentence analyses reveal that over 2 million Amhari could not be traced. The figure in general is associated with the decades-long massacres and enforced disappearances of the Amhari people. From the ongoing nature of the violence, the actual number is expected to be higher. Okay, so that's tragic, but the icing on the cake is the news this week from MSN.com. Ethiopia has secured an agreement with the International Monetary Fund for a new financing program worth $3.4 billion, the IMF said on Monday. It's like, man, this seems like a reward for all this stuff that this guy's doing. But I know you know a little bit about Ethiopia. And what can you tell us about the Amharas? Amhara. I don't even know if I'm pronouncing it right. The Amharas, these are the ones who are apparently getting the short end of the stick in this genocide.
Now, well, I mean, it's not something I'm incredibly well versed on, so it would just be off the cuff in general. But I can give you my overview of what, first and foremost, there's so much going on in the world. Nobody out there is going to be covering every single topic. It's just not, it's, the way that this tends to happen is that it's usually coming from, right now, it's coming from an Israeli kind of talking point to go, you didn't do this when Iraq was going on. Well, we did though, right? There was a hell of a lot of people marching during this, or any other narratives they say, like, well, what about this? Well, there's no logic to saying you could, like, who's to say what we're allowed to care about? Maybe somebody out there only cares about Gaza, doesn't care about it. That's their prerogative. So that the argument coming from these people is coming from a dishonest place. The argument is, don't look at Gaza unless you pretend like it's just normal, right? It's just like any other genocide. Like, it's just a weird argument, isn't it? And so I think the point is, whether that or any other discussion, it's important to first recognize what the interests are around all these things, right? And so just based on what you were highlighting there, and I think you made the point perfectly at the end there, the reality being that both the prime minister and the president are very cozy with the U.S. government. The prime minister himself, as it says here, has been close with the U.S. government since taking power. He's met with Anthony Blinken, has arranged diplomatic efforts with them. I mean, that doesn't have to prove anything, right? But to me, that's usually an indication that they are working together, right? And so weird that the corporate media is not screaming about the genocide in Ethiopia. I wonder why that would be, right? Or the fact that the IMF doesn't typically give massive loans to people that aren't working in the interest of the U.S. government, right? That's usually a reward that's given after you sell your soul to these powers. And it's usually, well, here's the money, do what you want, as long as you export everything we need and stop making what you need, and we'll take care of that until we no longer like what you're doing, and then we'll pull that rug out, right? That's how they work. It's classic foreign policy of the U.S. government. So when you can see those overlaps and the IMF giving them all the money while they're doing this, while then the media is not even talking about it, that's not us not talking about this genocide. That's the reality, that's exactly the point, that it's a genocide that's allowed. And the only reason we're talking about the genocide in Gaza is because Israel went full genocide on October 7th and pulled their own rug out. They made sure people saw what was going on. They destroyed any semblance of we're fighting on the right side, that we have the international law on our side, that we're fighting against terrorists. They destroyed this. And they woke up most everybody in the world. If that hadn't have happened, let's say hypothetically they went to the UN on day one and said they just did this, we need international support. My God, they already had blind support from the world. They would have never had to ask for another thing in their life. They would have been able to go on saying they're terrorists, we're murdering terrorists. The media would have been lockstep around it, and half the people wouldn't even know what's going on. That's the same point, right? So I think that's really the overarching reality. I recommend you do look into that. And by the way, look into the interesting overlaps of Israel in that location, or the fact that if you look up Rwanda or Bosnia or any of the most obvious and provable genocides in history, you will find U.S. and Israeli fingerprints all over it. Rwanda is a great example, as we know for a fact. Israel was arming them before, during, and after the genocide. You can show that they gave them the Uzis that were used, but nobody talks about this because, well, we're not allowed to say that because then you're racist. So that would be my overarching point there. That, I mean, maybe since you say this, I'll take some time to make a segment about it, because it does deserve to be highlighted. But I think last point, the reason that Israel and Gaza and Palestine is getting so much attention is because, and it's just no way meant to diminish or take away from the long plight of the people in Ethiopia, but the reality being that this has been a central political dynamic that really does tie into most of the world. What's been going on around Zionism and the Middle East and the occupation and the sabotage and the terrorism conducted by the Zionists and all the different lies that have caused the U.S. government to wage a war on the world to occupy other countries. It's far reaching. And so finally seeing people see through that, not just the reality of the post-October 7th genocide, but the larger reality of what Israel's government really is and what they've been a part of, the other genocides, other false flags and regime changes they're a part of. That's why it's got so much attention. Right. So when they're trying to push you away from it, I think there's an obvious reason. But yeah, we should care about Ethiopia.
Mm-hmm. Well said. And of course, the Uyghurs also don't get the attention that they should. And it was really just this issue with the 3.4 billion from the IMF after 5 years of typical dictator behavior, crushing dissent and killing off a certain type of person. And just the final point here on this is that the new IMF program includes the adoption of an interest rate based monetary policy in Ethiopia. And it's like the same old thing with going where the central banks aren't and taking over and installing a central bank and our whole process. And it's like, yeah, of course that's part of the deal. But
can't you just see all the starving people standing up and cheering? Yay, interest-based debt program.
We had an interest-based system. It'd solve all our problems. I know, it's so ridiculous. Like, that's their concern. Can you believe it, people? A video clip and a peek into how that sweet THC sausage is made. For some people, I'm sure it's nice to put a face to the name, so I started making clips that are a little more YouTube friendly than the full show tends to be. Get the full show on any podcasting platform. I prefer to keep it audio only, so we have a more decentralized distribution for a controversial show, and also so I can edit out the ums and ahs and barking dogs and all the things that happen when a person records in their home environment. And then if you really like the show, you can sign up for THC Plus, and instead of 1 hour interviews, you get the full 2 hour interview for just $8. I think that's a better deal, more of a win-win than asking you to support the show by booking a therapy session or buying generic Viagra. It's getting weird out there, folks. So just go to the highersidechats.com or click the link at the top of any set of show notes, and all your wildest dreams will come true. All right? All right. The